Good evening. A warm welcome to you all. Thank you all for being here, and my special thanks to Mr. Lindquist for organizing this and providing us this wonderful opportunity to come together. My name is Shaheen Akhtar. I am an interfaith liaison for Muslim community. I have been involved with interfaith work for almost 20 years. I'm committed to nurturing pluralistic values embedded in Islam. After 9/11, I started several interfaith book clubs and discussion groups. I am a member of Framingham and Wayland Clergy Association. Also, through my interfaith work, I have developed a wonderful relationship with clergy leaders of several towns. For my presentation, I would begin with what is Islam and Islam's connection with Judaism and Christianity. The Arabic word Islam means peace or submission. A person who believes in God, our Creator, and submits to Him, meaning makes a covenant to live his or her life according to His guidance, the Quran, that person is called a Muslim, meaning a submitter in English. Islam's message is not new. The story of Islam begins with Adam and Eve and continues through all the prophets. Since Islam is the continuation of the Abrahamic message of monotheism, we give great reverence to all the biblical prophets. And we believe that those prophets were submitters as well. There are 25 prophets mentioned in the Quran. We have Abraham, Ishmael, Jacob, Moses, and going down to Jesus, peace be upon him, and Prophet Muhammad as the last in the chain of the prophets. As Muslims, we are required to believe in Jesus, peace be upon him, as one of the greatest messengers of God. The Quran has a chapter called Maryam, which is an Arabic name for Mary. And Mary has been given the highest honor in the women of all nations. And we read Jesus' birth stories in a couple of chapters, and we believe in what was revealed to Jesus in Aramaic, the Bible called Injil in Arabic. And we also believe in what was revealed to Moses, peace be upon him, in Hebrew called Torah, and in Arabic called Taurat. And actually, Prophet Moses is mentioned in the Quran more than any other prophet, and his life story is narrated in several chapters. So throughout our lives, we read their stories and reflect upon them. So these stories are Muslim stories as well. Prophet Muhammad did not bring a new message. He was commanded to follow in the footsteps of Abraham and call on to all humanity that there is one God, our Creator, one message, and one humanity. Islam is not named after any human being or a particular tribe or a race. Islam's message is universal. Islam is about deeds. It is a verb. It is not a state of being, rather it is a process of becoming more better and striving to reach that state of perfect submission and connection with all. In one of the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, I find the clearest articulation of this. Once he was returning home from a battle and told his companions that we are returning home from a lesser jihad to a greater jihad, which is an inner struggle to be a better person and to be merciful to others. Unfortunately, the concept of jihad has been grossly misunderstood by some so-called Muslims and by some non-Muslims as well. We, as followers of all the prophets and Prophet Muhammad, need to be nothing but merciful to others. Compassion represents the true spirit of Islam. If I cannot soften my heart for the other, if I cannot embrace our common humanity, if I cannot acknowledge the otherness of the other, if I cannot respect the sanctity of every human life, then I need to reflect and ask myself, am I worthy of the designation a Muslim? Am I worthy of the designation a Muslim? Islam is about transcending all the differences. The Quran says there is no compulsion in religion. It calls on to humanity to come to common terms and strive together as in a race to do good. The essence of Islam is to avoid all extremes. We are supposed to be the religion of the middle path. Islam is not a hodgepodge of cultural and political ideologies, the dividing theologies that Quran warns against. It is a simple tradition of peacefulness, ethical behavior, submission to our Creator, and service to His creation. Prophet Muhammad brought a profound message of peace and social justice. Now let's look at who was Prophet Muhammad and his connection with Abraham, and how our primary sacred sites of Islam tie into the biblical account. To understand Prophet Muhammad's lineage and his mission, we need to go back to our patriarch Abraham, who plays a significant role in the development of Islam. This is where it all began, the valley of Baqa, which is the ancient name for the city of Makkah, Saudi Arabia. This valley is referenced in the Psalms 84, verses 4 to 6, and Quran chapter 3, 96 and 97. This house of worship called the Kaaba, we believe that this sanctuary had originally been built by Abraham and his son Ishmael. For us, Kaaba has the historical primacy over all the other houses of worship because of its connection with Abraham. And this sanctuary is the center of the Islamic world. It is obligatory for every Muslim once in their lifetime, if they have good health and enough financial resources, to make pilgrimage to this sanctuary. Every year, more than 3 million Muslims from every corner of the globe gather here to commemorate Abraham and his family's unwavering submission to our Creator. It is like going back to our roots where it all began, and to reaffirm our faith that there is no God but God, our Creator. This is the place where baby Ishmael and Hagar were left by Abraham when Sarah banished them. This was a barren land without any water. This is the same place when baby Ishmael starts crying with thirst and mother Hagar starts running in search for water, and a spring emerges. This is the same spring which Genesis makes a reference to, where Hagar stopped by, known as Beer Lahai, meaning well of the living one who sees me. Genesis 21 verses 19 through 22. And this is the same spring we call in Arabic the well of Zamzam, meaning the well of abundance, which is still flowing and supplying water to all the pilgrims and the city of Makkah. Pilgrims bring back bottles of Zamzam water for their family and friends, and this well has been running even after 4,000 years from the time of Ishmael. And this is my bottle of Zamzam water which one of my friends brought. And this is the place of orientation for our 5-time daily prayers, orienting space throughout our lives, even orientation for our gravesites. And this orientation stands as a symbol of universal brotherhood. And this is the place where Prophet Muhammad was born in the year 570 into the tribe of Ishmael. So through Ishmael, he becomes the direct descendant of Abraham. So we are all cousins. We are all cousins through Abraham's son Ishmael and Isaac. And we all belong to the same family of Abraham. Above all, we all come from the same source of reality. I call that reality in Arabic Allah, and my Jewish friends call that reality Elohim. Allah is not a different God as some people believe. The Quran refers to Jews and Christians as the people of the book. And we feel a deep connection with you all, and we pray for all the descendants of Abraham in our daily prayers. Now let's look at why was there a need for Prophet Muhammad and what was his mission. By the time of Prophet's birth, this sanctuary, which was established by Abraham for the worship of the one God, had become the center of idol worshiping. All the people of Arabia had moved away from monotheism. So 600 years after Jesus, peace be upon him, God chose Prophet Muhammad to revive the Abrahamic movement of monotheism, thus reasserting the primordial nature of monotheism. And his ministry was for 23 years. Throughout his life, he had concerns about the society, and he wanted to change the condition of the people. He used to go up to a mountain cave and contemplate there for hours about nature, society, and the meaning of life. So during one of these meditations, during the month of Ramadan, God sent angel Gabriel with the first revelation of the Quran. Prophet Muhammad did not know how to read or write, so he memorized those verses, then dictated them to his companions. These revelations continued for 23 years and were written down during the Prophet's time. Not a single word of the Quran has been changed from the time of its revelation. All the verses have been kept intact. If you pick up a copy of the Quran in somewhere, like in Africa or anywhere in Arabic, you would not find any difference between that copy and my copy in Arabic. The Quranic message is as relevant to us today as it was 1400 years ago, because its message is of peace, respecting the sanctity of every human life, justice and equality for all. The American values that we all cherish, like service, charity, and tolerance, and the American ideals of liberty, democracy, and freedom of religion are the same principles taught by the Quran to uphold. I am proud to be an American and proud to be a Muslim. I do not find any contradiction between the Quranic teachings, the heart and soul of my faith, and the U.S. Constitution, the heart of our nation. And I do not find any conflict between these two identities. I would challenge those who see Islam and American values as incompatible. There is a long history of branding Islam as un-American and dehumanizing Muslims. Some call it a clash of civilizations, but actually it is a clash of ignorance. Back in the 7th century, the Quran introduced the concept that individuals have inalienable rights. Justice was at the core of its message. The Quran was asserting individual rights on the basis of equality of every human being. The Quran stood against all forms of racial discrimination. The Prophet appointed a freed slave as the first caller to prayer and honored him as one of his distinguished companions. Contrast this with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s struggles and the race relations in our country now. When our country was going through segregation, all the mosques were integrated. The Quran gave rights to women at a time when women were considered property of men, and women could own property. The Quran put an end to female infanticide. It posed the question, when a girl child that was buried alive is made to ask for what crime she had been slain. The Quran was countering tribal fights and calling for unity. The Quran was asking pagans to reason, reflect, and ponder over the creation of the universe and their own bodies, and acknowledge that there is no God but God, our Creator. But this call to reason did not go well with the pagans, and the Prophet was faced with an enormous opposition and death threats. So God commanded him to move to the city of Medina, where people were receptive to his message of monotheism. So this migration was a turning point in the Islamic history, and the Islamic New Year begins with this migration when Muslims achieved freedom of religion. So you can see how important the freedom of religion is in Islam. Here in Medina, the Prophet established the first Islamic state. He dictated a constitution in which Muslims, Jewish tribes, pagan Arabs, and all the other tribes entered into a social contract which became known as the Constitution of Medina, which granted equal rights and freedom of religion and justice and equality for all. This is the first written constitution of human history and the first constitution of democracy in the history of the constitutional rule. And this constitution stands as a symbol of pluralism in Islam. Because of these peaceful teachings, by the time of Prophet's death, all the people of Arabia had moved away from idol worshipping, had entered into the fold of Islam. When Prophet returned to Makkah, the city of his birthplace, from where he was born and where he was executed, he entered with humility and without any bloodshed, and forgave all his enemies. And when some Muslims were feeling overwhelmed with the victory and wanted to take revenge, he reminded them that we are returning home from a lesser jihad to a greater jihad, which is to be merciful to others. And he cleansed this sanctuary from all the idols and established Islam forever, which is to worship our Creator. The Quran says, if you kill one person, it is as if you have killed all of humanity. And if you save one person, it is as if you have saved all of humanity. Islam allows fighting only in self-defense. There are strict rules of engagement. You cannot even destroy any crop, harm any women and children, or destroy any houses of worship. Furthermore, the Quran says you cannot inflict more damage than the enemy has inflicted upon you. But if you are patient, it would be better for you. So contrast this with ISIS's ideology. ISIS is antithetical to Islam. It's all about politics and power. ISIS has declared war on Prophet Muhammad's covenant with the monks of Mount Sinai in 628. This covenant commands all Muslims to protect Christians and their houses of worship. This covenant guarantees unconditional protection for all. And if we disobey, then we would spoil God's covenant. Prophet Muhammad also said that human life is more sacred than the sacred house, the Kaaba. So this is the Grand Mosque of Paris. I was there last August. This mosque has a profound history of Muslims saving Jews during Holocaust. This mosque was used as a secret refuge to hide Jews, and the Imam, the Muslim leader, gave fake Muslim birth certificates to protect them. This mosque was founded in 1926 by the French government after World War I as a token of gratitude to Muslims, because more than 100,000 Muslims died fighting against Germany. A Muslim American Marine wrote a testimony to his fallen Marine brothers when 4 Marines and 1 sailor were killed in Chattanooga, Tennessee by a troubled Muslim man with depression. He wrote in Associated Press, "When I told my parents about my decision to enlist, they fully supported it because they knew Prophet Muhammad's commandment to all Muslims, that loyalty to your country of residence is part of your faith." He further wrote, "I see nothing Islamic in this act of terrorism. No difference exists between the Chattanooga terrorist, the terrorist Dylan Roof, who allegedly killed 9 innocent Black Americans in Charleston, or James Holmes, the terrorist convicted of killing 12 innocent people in a Colorado theater. Adam Lanza killed 26 children in Sandy Hook Elementary School. The list goes on. Let us not forget those who were killed just because they looked like Muslims. A white supremacist shot 6 worshipers at Wisconsin Sikh temple. Friends, terrorism has no religion. Terrorism has no religion. Unfortunately, when mass shootings are done by non-Muslims, other religious communities do not face the responsibility of collective condemnation and backlash as our community faces. We always hear this refrain, Where is the Muslim condemnation? Of course, we denounce these heinous acts. It grieves us to see loss of lives. But somehow this all gets linked to Islam as if Islam is inherently a violent religion. In the fight against ISIS, only the radicals should be the enemy, not Islam and all Muslims. All religions have hateful radicals. All religions have hateful radicals. Let us not forget the Crusades, the Inquisition, Holocaust, Bosnia genocide, the list goes on. Unfortunately, our mainstream media and some politicians paint a distorted picture of Islam. Repeated over and over again, these dangerous stereotypes can harbor hatred and polarize our nation, which we are seeing now. Friends, we need to reject the politics of fear. We cannot let this anti-Muslim backlash expand. We have a moral imperative to defend our children and young people from these erroneous judgments. We need to work together and share positive stories that highlight our common humanity. After Chattanooga shooting, Muslims and local community worked together, and the result of working together is this beautiful plaque for the 5 fallen service members, which testifies to how the city responded. We did not riot, we prayed, we did not lash out at easy targets for revenge. Instead, we invited each other into our lives, homes, and places of worship. Islam as a tradition is meant for all places and times, a faith that has sustained billions of followers for more than 1,000 years and contributed enormously to human civilization. Today, there are Muslim communities on every continent, not on Antarctica, I assume. Today's world's Muslim population is over 1.7 billion Muslims. And according to Pew Research, Islam is the fastest growing religion. By 2050, the population is going to reach around 3 billion. Although Islam is often associated with the Arab world and Middle East, fewer than 15% of Muslims are Arab. And the entire region of Middle East and North Africa is home to an estimated 315 million, whereas over 1 billion Muslims live in Southeast Asia. And the largest Muslim population is in Indonesia, over 255 million, which is little less than our US population. And followed by Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and so on. And there are over 8 million Muslims in America. Muslims have been here since the birth of the nation. According to historians, about a quarter to a third of the slaves who were brought here were Muslims, and most of them were forced to convert to Christianity. Some of the slaves even fought in George Washington's army. You can find names like Muhammad and Yusuf bin Ali on the rosters of Washington's soldiers. And we all remember the Battle of Bunker Hill in Boston and Peter Buckminster. He was perhaps Washington's most distinguished Muslim American soldier. He was born in Framingham, and Buckminster was his master. Years after the battle, he changed his name to Salam, which means peace. Muslim soldiers have given their lives protecting America. According to Department of Defense, close to 4,000 Muslims fought in Afghanistan and Iraq war. And you can find tombstones with Muslim names in the Arlington Cemetery. So Captain Humayun Khan, which we heard during the Democratic Convention, isn't the only Muslim American hero. So patriotism and Islam are not mutually exclusive. If those soldiers were alive today, they would challenge those critics who question Muslims' loyalty to our nation. America has historical engagement with Islam. Our founding fathers included Islam and Muslims. Thomas Jefferson advocated for Muslims' rights. He speculated that there would be Muslims in the nation. Ironically, Washington and Jefferson never knew that real Muslims were already in America. There were Muslim slaves on Washington's plantation, though we do not have any records Jefferson owning any Muslim slaves. Jefferson had heard about European prejudices about Islam, but he looked beyond those prejudices and wanted to make sure that Muslims, Jews, Catholics, and all other minorities have equal rights. Thomas Jefferson owned a copy of the Quran, which he bought while he was in the law school in 1765, 11 years before he wrote the Declaration of Independence. There's a long history of presence of copies of the Quran in American libraries, going back to 1683. Massachusetts has its own history about the Quran. The first American edition was printed in Springfield, and the copies were sold in Worcester and Springfield in 1806. And John Adams, who helped to create the Massachusetts Constitution, owned a copy of the Quran, which is kept in the Boston Public Libraries under rare manuscripts. I took a picture of this from Adams' copy. Friends, our founding fathers were ahead of us. They were ahead of us. You will be very surprised to know that Prophet Muhammad's sculpture is inside the U.S. Supreme Court chamber. The statue carries the Quran, and the Quran is open, and you can see Arabic on both the pages. This is a great honor given to the Prophet Muhammad as one of the greatest lawgivers of history. At this critical time, when Islamophobia is at its peak, it is necessary for us to recognize this inclusion as a symbol of the positive relationship our founding fathers had with Islam. If you ask me, can American Muslims and an American society move forward together? I would say, yes, we can. Yes, we can. But it has been a very, very difficult road making any gains toward inclusion. We can do it by following our founding fathers' examples. As George Washington said, to bigotry, no sanction. To bigotry, no sanction. And by affirming our common humanity. The Quran says humanity is not but a single nation. God calls unto humanity, behold, we have created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, so that you may come to know one another, not that you may despise one another. I like us to reflect on this verse, which has a profound meaning and inspires me deeply. Speaking to the whole of humanity, the Quran declares, your creation and your resurrection is but as a single soul. The divide we have, us and them, the boundaries separating us from others, are transparent in the light of intrinsic nature of oneness of humanity. And this unity of humanity is itself a reflection of the oneness of God, which is our Islamic doctrine. There is no God but God, our Creator. And the message is to serve humanity with compassion, mercy, and forgiveness. At the end, I'd like to talk briefly about this poster, which was created by September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrow's Anti-Islamophobia Committee. This organization was founded by members of September 11th Families who believe in turning their grief into action for peace. They have been working hard throughout these years countering Islamophobia. Robin Bernstein, who is the co-chair of the Anti-Islamophobia Committee, is a member of my interfaith group. And I'm so honored to have this wonderful relationship with them. A Muslim mother is also a member of this organization. She lost her son. He was not in the towers at that time. He was commuting to work and saw the towers burning. So he rushed to help. And he died in the towers helping. Unfortunately, just because he was a Muslim, his name ended up on the terrorist list. His parents tried very hard to clear his name. But finally, when his remains were found near the North Tower, in 2002, his name was cleared. Friends, we cannot let these dangerous stereotypes divide us. There is so much goodness at the core of humanity. We need to seize this moment to show our compassion. Moderate voices from every religion need to be heard. It is imperative for all of us to recognize and to bridge this divide. We can only do that when we begin to recognize that there is no them, there is only us. Because God has sanctified all of our lives. And together, we can turn the tide toward unity and peace. Peace be with you all. Thank you for coming here and opening your heart to listen to me. Thank you. So before Q&A session, I'd like to share a couple of resources which would help you to understand the scope of Islamophobia in America. So we have this book, The Islamophobia Industry, How the Right Manufactures Fear of Muslims. It's by Nathan Lean, who's the professor at Georgetown University, researcher. And this book could not be more timely. It exposes the multi-million-dollar cottage industry of all the network of funders and Islamophobes who support and perpetuate bigotry, xenophobia, and all kinds of racism. And we have another report done by Council on Islamic American Relations and UC Berkeley Center for Race and Gender. You can find this report on in PDF file on www.islamophobia.org. This report goes into more details about how many organizations there are. So there are, here we have 33 inner core groups, and so far they have spent over $200 million spreading hate. This money could have been used for spreading compassion and other positive things. This is all. You can go to www.islamophobia.org, and then we have this report goes into more details of which organization and how much money here. So Islamophobia is not going to go away soon. It is so deep now, and all these forces working against Muslims. And we have, I want to end with a positive note, because you don't get to hear anything positive about us. So a new survey came out, which was done by the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And this survey shows that Muslims are actually among America's most model citizens. And when it comes to identifying as a patriot, 85% of Muslims have a strong American identity, just like 84% of Protestants. And this survey found zero correlation between Muslim religious identity, mosque attendance, and attitude toward violence. Also, more than half of Muslims report experiencing discrimination on the basis of their religion, compared to 5% of Jews, 4% of Catholics, and 2% of Protestants. Muslims are the most optimistic people about the future of America. And finally, the poll found that Muslims make pretty great neighbors. Pretty great neighbors. How about that? So I would end with that and would be happy to take questions.
I know you can't answer this tonight, but if you place the Bible scripture beside the Quran, is it set up the same with chapters and verses and stories and the history?
Okay, so
is it similar at all?
You would not. It's not a book like a story book, like going in chapters and beginning with the creation. Actually, if we, for example, take the subject of creation, right? So those verses relating to the creation of us, human beings, and creation of the universe, and they spread all over the Quran. And that description from those verses matches exactly the same as what the scientists have found out and come up with, how the embryo how the embryo develops and everything. So that is a kind of, there's so much scientific information in the Quran as well, and the stories of the prophets, and so it doesn't go in order, because these were the revelations came. It took 23 years of revelations as the guidance was needed, and the angel Gabriel would bring revelations. So this is why it's important for us to understand the historical context and the occasions of revelations when we are, understanding the Quran. But people take verses out of context, and then the trouble starts. And that really doesn't tell you the whole story.
Because the Quran was revealed in various times during an extended period, what you find in the Quran is a lot of things are repeated in different chapters again and again and again and again. And I think it has to do more with the fact that the revelations came at different times, and they have to be somehow, relate back to something that might have come some time ago.
So it's like the stories are complementary, the Quranic stories and the Bible stories, and you would find stories, like we have Moses' story and Abraham and all those prophets' stories, as I mentioned in my presentation. And also the reason they are repeated again is that as a reminder. And in the Quran, the meaning, the word in Arabic Quran, and the meaning is that to read, to recite. And another name of the Quran is criterion, so the right and wrong. So God would give us the guidance. And he doesn't say that, okay, if he says that I'm giving you this guidance, it's up to you. This is the criteria. If you are, good criteria, and these are the bad choices. So it's up to human beings. As the Quran says, there is no compulsion in religion, but all of us, we believe that the Quran says that accountable to God for our actions. So that is the whole, and the Quran commands us to have a moral, to excel in our moral character. So that's the whole idea behind it. But we are accountable for our action, and also God says that human beings are the best creation, and we are endowed with the knowledge. We are endowed with the knowledge, and it's up to us how we want to, live our life. We can be so high, and some can go low. So that is the whole idea. So and we don't believe that human beings are sinners, or so we are accountable for our actions, and we were created in the best of mold, and it's up to us how we want to and where we want to go with that. So our whole life we are taught to keep that state of level of goodness, and try not to go down.
You mentioned in other religious traditions throughout history, there have been others who have perpetuated extremist ideology, the Inquisition you mentioned. I'm curious, ISIS wasn't the first one to use Islam and radical jihad. Is that correct? I mean, there were others prior to ISIS who have used it in radical extremist ways? Or
in our tradition?
Yes. Or are they the...
They're
the ones...
Well, they're all same categories, started from Taliban, and again, Taliban are what they were doing is so against Islamic teachings, because for us, whether you're a man or a woman, it is necessary for us to have education. And the Prophet Muhammad said that you need to gain knowledge, till the grave. You have to keep and go as far as China or everywhere to gain knowledge, and for them to do that is totally un-Islamic. And what the ISIS people are doing is also anti-Islamic. Just to give you an example, an American soldier who was in Iraq, and he really wanted to understand what is this all about, why is these people killing. So he bought a copy of the Quran, and he understood the Quran in its proper and full context. And then he lobbied for the coalition forces to out-argue Al-Qaeda on the points of Islamic theology. And he concluded that these people, by definition, are anti-Islamic. This captain is Captain Travis Petroquin, and Mr. William Doyle, he wrote an entire book on him. It's called A Soldier's Dream. The name of the book is Soldier's Dream, Captain Travis Petroquin and the Awakening of Iraq. So it's very powerful, and the article says the U.S. Army captain avowed terrorists are not Muslims. If some people from other religions, right, they are doing shootings, killing people, they're calling themselves Christians or Jews, and they're not saying I'm not Christian, I'm not Jew, or I'm not Buddhist. So it is up to us. Because there's a debate going on that we should call them Islamic or not. We cannot, because what they are doing is totally against Islam. So how can you call them Islamic terrorists? If we are calling Islamic terrorists, they will be very happy, because this will help them in their marketing and recruiting process. Because others who are very impressionable, young people, they would think, oh wow, this is so Islamic, what is going on? But they are not Islamic, and we cannot call them Islamic. And this debate, and the Dalai Lama was asked, he was in the European Parliament, and he said, these are not Muslims. It is very wrong wording. And the Pope Francis also said, I cannot, he was asked, why don't you call it Islamic terrorism? He said, I cannot, because it has nothing to do with Islam. If I'm going to call this Islamic terrorism, then I have to talk about Catholic terrorism also. So this conflation, it doesn't work. It is not right. We cannot call them, because they have left the teaching of Islam and doing this killing, and to call them Islamic would be like, I don't want to use the word, but oxymoron or so that's the whole, so there is a big debate going on whether you should call them this and that. No, they are just not Islamic. Because in Islam, as I mentioned in my presentation, the essence of Islam is to avoid all extremes, even in worship. Even in worship. That's why we do not have a concept of you leave everything and be a celibate, give up the world. We have to live in the world, not beyond it. You cannot be, or just say, I'm just going to pray all day. You have things to take care of, and you are the vicegerent of God on this earth.
What is Sharia law, and where does that come from? Is that part of the Quran, and why do they associate that with Islam?
Okay, I'm glad you asked, because the Sharia word, just like jihad, is totally misunderstood. And the anti-Muslim activists, they always try to scare our fellow Americans that, oh, Muslims are trying to sneak Sharia into American law. That is incorrect. We are not trying to do any sneak any Sharia law. In fact, it is one of the requirements of Sharia to follow the rule of the land, and Sharia also. But Sharia, we have to follow Sharia in the sense that Sharia literally means a path to be followed, and it is a broader term which encompasses personal code of personal code, behavior code, and religious law. And there are two sources of Sharia, first the Quran and then the tradition of the Prophet. And then we have interpretation of the Sharia, which is called Islamic jurisprudence. All right? And then we have this, the reason I say that we followed Sharia in the sense that Sharia covers personal and collective spheres of daily life. It has three components to it. It has belief, character, and action. So belief would be relating to God, believing in our Creator, prophets, and relating to the Quran. And then the character, Sharia commands Muslims to strive to reach moral excellence. And then the action part would be duties relating to God, like prayers and fasting and charity, and other how do we relate with other human beings and other people of other faiths, etc. So how does Sharia fit with Western law? We do not see any problem. The problem arises when we do not have freedom of religion. As I mentioned in my presentation, that freedom of religion is very important in Islam. And about the character, the modesty is one of the characteristics of Islam. If the library has something like dress code that I shouldn't be wearing trousers, or if I should wear something else, mini skirts or something, that would not be right for me. So these are common sense, right? And like the France has went through Burkini whole controversy on that. What is wrong with that? The people just want to be modest, and they have a right to dress modestly. And so this guy wrote a nice essay, and he said, I have nothing against Burkini, but I have something against with these people men in suits, because Burkinis, they are not dangerous people, but the people in suits, they have ruined my 401k and other things. So people need to just use common sense, just common sense. And when it comes to action part, and if the government says that the Muslim store owners have to sell alcohol, but some Muslims do not want to sell alcohol because we are not supposed to drink alcohol or do any drugs or anything. Like China is forcing on Muslim store owners to sell alcohol. That would be wrong. and if we are not allowed to fast, then that would be a problem. So these kind of things, so it's the Islamic law is not codified. It's open to debate and interpretation, just like any other sophisticated legal system. And so, and it is forbidden to ignore the realities of contemporary times when, the scholars are coming up with the rulings. And the other things we need to keep in mind is that our American courts in the justice system, some judges, they have to take into consideration the Sharia law. For example, in cases of divorce, if the marriage is done in a different Islamic country, the judges have to take the validity of the Islamic marriage in that country while issuing divorce. So these kind of things, and there's nothing wrong with these. These are just freedom of religion. So we do not see any problem, and nobody needs to be afraid that Sharia law is such a thing that Muslims are coming with Sharia law into American legal system.
Would you mind just briefly the division between Sunni and Shia? Could you
Yes, sure.
touch on that?
So
please?
Yes, that's another question I'm always asked. So there is not a big difference. The difference is only on the decision who was going to be the leader after the Prophet's death. Prophet had not assigned any particular person to be the leader, so after his death, majority of the Muslims thought and wanted to have his friend Abu Bakr, who was the first Muslim and believed in Prophet Muhammad, and he was with him throughout his life, throughout the mission. So majority of the Muslims thought that he should be the leader, but a very small number of people, they thought that the leadership should come from the bloodline of the Prophet. So they wanted his cousin and son-in-law, Ali, to be the leader. And so the Shia actually means the party of Ali. And so they have the same Quran. And there's no 5 pillars. They go to the same pilgrimage and whole thing. It's just that nowadays this has become a very political issue, but it's not much of a religious, but it has become a political issue, and so there's tension between between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that sort of tension, but there is nothing. And this happened after all the Quranic revelations and all that was completed. And so this was just a difference of opinion on who was going to be the leader. And also I want to mention that the Shia roughly make between 10 and 13%, which is roughly between 154 and 200 million Muslims. And they are predominantly in Iran, Iraq, and Pakistan and India, and small communities in Syria and other countries. And the Sunni population is between 85 and 90. So you're welcome. So thank you so much for coming and listening to me, and just by coming here you have made a tremendous difference.